In the past few years, I had occasion to meet with Pierre Vandel, our guest speaker, and found him to be just a great person to be speaking on this topic. Prior to introducing Pierre, though, we've had an approach by somebody who said they wanted to show us a little native greeting, so I invite Mr. McIntyre and Rachel Lee.
I just want to say on behalf of Rachel Lee that she is an incredible mother of four and just doing amazing things with the Blue Sky Singers, the Good Hearted Women. They travel all over Ontario and into the States. And she's just here to bring you a special greeting on behalf of the Indigenous people that so kindly share our lives and our destinies. So Rachel Lee.
It's very lovely to be here. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are on, which is Haudenosaunee territory. So I'm going to just present you with a welcoming and a greeting song.
I'm sure you've gone through the same exercise. Where does this Indigenous studies and the Indigenous people fit into Rotary? Is it in community service? No. Is it in international? No. Well, where is it? We don't have a sort of, it's not in our 4 avenues of service. So in our club, we formed an Indigenous People Committee. And it's one of the best attended groups in our club. So there's a tremendous interest. And there's also a lot of people that are saying, well, what is Rotary doing? Well, we don't know what to do. We want to study. We want more of this. We want more of that. How do we know it'll work? Well, as I read somewhere, the worst thing you can do maybe sometimes is stand still and do nothing. So you have to try. In July of 2015, through Pierre's introduction, we had a conversation with 2 ladies from Moose Factory. They came to our club. What a couple of ladies they were. They made us aware of what the issues were, and they zeroed in on education. From their point of view, that was the avenue that they thought we could best help. So we went further with it, and we made further contact with Pierre Zondel from the University of Sudbury. University of Sudbury, he'll get asked this, is like St. Mike's is to U of T. It's a branch of Laurentian University. Pierre's moving on at the end of this month to Laurentian, but he'll never lose his contact, I'm sure, with the Korean native people on James and Hudson Bay. He started out at U of T as a tree hugger in forestry, and he speaks Cree. He's been to these communities, He knows these people and loves these people. So without further ado, I introduce you to Pierre.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Rachel, for starting us off in that way. I just want to correct one thing that Bill said. I speak a little Ojibwe. I don't actually speak Cree. But anyway, I certainly have learned a huge amount in the last 7 years that I've been at the University of Sudbury. And my biggest learning has been, well, first to unlearn a lifetime of what I thought I knew about Indigenous people, and then to begin to replace it with a story a little bit more accurate than the one that I started out with. So Bill gave you a little sense of what the University of Sudbury is. So we are a federated university at Laurentian University. We're about 100 years old. Started out as a Jesuit institution in Sudbury. And all through our existence, we have been, as the Jesuits often are, out in the communities, bringing education to people rather than always asking people to come to us. And about 3 or 4 years ago, when the University of Sudbury was approaching its centennial year, we began to ask, who needs us and what do they need us for? The world's changed a lot in 100 years, and so there might have been some need to refocus. So what we ended up with at the end of that reflection was the idea that we were going to bring education to those for whom it is difficult to get it, with a particular focus on Francophone and, of relevance to today, Indigenous learners. And one of the things that we did as part of that soul searching was to go out and consult with the communities that are in the north, in the south, all of the Francophone, Indigenous, Anglophone communities. And in the course of that work, it became clear that one place that had a profound need for education and where access was almost non-existent was on the James Bay coast. And so most of what I'm going to talk to you about today is about the James Bay coast, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the geography of that in just a moment. So we had our initial meetings with an organization called the Kashechewan Tribal Council. And as some of you may know, many of the Indigenous communities are grouped together into political entities that have similar issues or similar cultural backgrounds. And there are 7 communities on the James Bay coast and south that are linked in this body called the Kashechewan Tribal Council. Kashechewan just means the people of the Muskeg, or the Swampy Cree, they used to be called in the old days. In our conversations with them, what became clear was that there were particular needs that people in that region had. And I'll just say a little bit about those. I think it might be helpful. One is that the people who live in those communities almost all have families. And for them, when they leave the community, what it means is to take their families away from the language group and the family group with which they were raised. And I know one of the students that is in our Moose Factory project had said to us, she had 3 children, I think they were all under 10 years old, said, if I leave now for 4 years to do a degree, my children will lose their ability to speak Cree, will lose their relationship with their grandparents, who are the main transmitters of culture. And so she said, I can't do that to them. So if I'm going to study, I'm going to have to study here, or I'm going to have to wait another 10 or 15 years until the children are old enough that I can afford to do it. So there are lots of people who are limited in their ability to access education by family responsibilities, and people in those communities have their children much younger than we have here. And they depend on the community for their support. So the family relationships are extremely tight. The whole family brings up children. They're not just little nuclear families like we have here that are widely separated. Everybody's together. You know that saying about it takes a village to raise a child? In those communities, that's really what's going on. And if I think of the students that we have in those Indigenous communities, almost all of them work. I think something like 95% of those students are actually fully employed in jobs. Now they're limited in their employment because they don't have post-secondary education. They could be better employed and having a bigger impact in the community, but they're already employed. And so for them to come south to go to school means a loss of employment and a loss of income for the family. So that gets to be a challenge. And one of the biggest misconceptions about Aboriginal people is that all Aboriginal people get all of their studies paid for completely. Everybody gets a full ride. In fact, that's not at all true. In many communities, the education authorities that administer the funds they receive from the federal government for education are in a situation where they can either provide some of the students all of the funding that they need, or some funding for all of the students. But they're almost never in a situation where they can provide all of the funding for all of the students. And you have to appreciate that the funding for these students is much higher than it would be here, because it involves getting people out of the communities, and it's more expensive to go to those James Bay communities than it is to go to Europe. So it's a very expensive business to go to school. So one of the things that we have to deal with is insufficient financial resources. I don't want to get into statistics for a long time, so I think I'll put you all to sleep. But one of the things that is a really major problem is that funding growth for post-secondary education for Aboriginal people was frozen in 1995, 21 years ago, at 2% per year. Just the cost of university education has been going up by about 4.5%. And if you look at the population growth in Aboriginal communities, which far outstrips what our population growth is in the South, the shortfall is enormous in the amount of money that they have available to send people to school. So it's a real problem. Okay, so just to let you know where we are talking about, there are 4 communities that we deal with on the coast. There's the one where we started in Moose Factory at the very bottom end of James Bay. This is James Bay, Hudson's Bay up here. This circle for Kashechewan isn't quite right. The Albany River comes out here. On the south side, a little bit upstream, is Fort Albany. On the north side, a little bit further downstream, is Kashechewan. Kashechewan is famous for its annual flooding, and I think almost a third of its population is currently in Kapuskasing as a result of the flood that damaged the housing a year ago this spring. And then, of course, Attawapiskat at the mouth of the Attawapiskat River a little bit further north. And we all know what the news coverage has been from Attawapiskat with very large numbers of teen suicide attempts and an ongoing sort of hopelessness and crisis. So our objective in getting involved with this project was to bring education to the communities. One of the residues of the residential schools history in these communities, and many of these had residential schools in them, is that students have a kind of ambivalent relationship with education. Education hasn't always been a good thing for Aboriginal people. And so for many of them, there's a kind of reticence about sending your kids to school. There's that major challenge. And there's a tremendous lack of confidence. People were told they were stupid, drunk, good for nothing. Their relationship with the federal government has infantilized them for as long as it's existed. And so people do not have a high level of confidence with respect to their ability to study. And when we first advertised this program in Moose Factory, we put ads out on the community television channel where community announcements run. We put posters up. We put ads on the radio. And we had 2 people out of a community of several thousand who indicated their interest. When we went out by word of mouth with people we knew in the community, we were able to recruit an initial class of 21. What was the reason that 19 of them didn't apply in the first round? I could never do university. That's way too hard, right? University is for smart people. I can't possibly do that. Well, the folks who took those, the 21 who took those courses, 95% completed those courses with success. So there's no less capability in these communities than there is here, but there's a real crisis of confidence. So that was one of the things that we had to overcome. So we have to bring education to them, and particularly the older folks who have a job, who have families, who can't easily leave the community. And to get this project underway, we worked with a number of partners. And this is one of the things about the project that we're doing is a highly leveraged project with all kinds of different partners who put in particular pieces. So our initial partner was the Kashechewan Tribal Council that I mentioned earlier. They represent those 7 communities, of which the 4 that we work with are a part. They're Cree-speaking communities, most of them having come out of that swampy territory to the west of James Bay and the rivers that run north into it. There are 4 individual First Nations. I showed them to you on the map a few minutes ago: Attawapiskat, Fort Albany, Kashechewan, and Moose Factory. Contact North, many of you may not know that organization. It's a provincial crown corporation responsible for delivering distance education to communities that don't have access to education otherwise. 1,000 full programs, 1,900 courses, a wide range of programming, and they have a lot of experience and expertise dealing in these communities, and they have their own individual sites in Attawapiskat and in Moose Factory, but they don't have a presence in Kashechewan and Fort Albany because there's no physical location for them to have a lab where students can learn, and there's no staff in those communities. There's a company owned by the Cree communities called the Western James Bay Telecom Network. They're one of our partners. So in Kashechewan, they worked with us to prepare the wiring and the connections for the adult learning lab. They've also been able to help us with their contacts in the community. So they recruited one of the local airlines, Thunder Air, to fly computers in for us for free. And of course, we have the Department of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, the old Indian Affairs Department of the federal government, that this year provided us about $250,000 to allow us to bring courses to move beyond Moose Factory to the other 3 communities up the coast. When we offer courses in these places, they are geared to adult learners who have full-time jobs. So in Moose Factory, for example, we do 6 Saturdays in a semester, full day, and then half a day on Sunday for extra help from the instructor. So that allows people to continue their job and then to do their studies on the weekends. We also, as I said earlier, there's a real issue with confidence. So part of what we do is we build learning communities. So these people, although they come from the same community, they never have had the occasion to work together or build strong relationships. So we help them. We develop Facebook pages for each of the groups. We encourage them to get together and study together. To the extent that we can, again, to leverage resources that are already available, we use PhD-trained instructors in the communities. You wouldn't think so, but there are 2 PhD-trained Indigenous Studies faculty members that are available in Attawapiskat. Totally blew my mind the first time I went there. So we use local instructors, and these courses are in Indigenous studies that we're offering in the communities. They're really designed to build skills. So communication skills, research, writing, group work, many of the skills that they have to apply in their day-to-day work, whatever their professional engagement is at the moment. And although we offer Indigenous Studies courses, many of them follow up with courses in other disciplines because that's their interest. Once they understand that they can learn at the university level, once they have some credits, then they can shift into business or into some of the health professions. A couple of them have gone on to do education full-time. One of them has actually moved full-time down to Nipissing to do their B.Ed degree. The other thing we do, and this is the last thing I'll say about our courses, they help the Indigenous people in those communities understand their context and have a framework for it. So we've heard things from our students like, now that I understand the history of the residential schools and the way in which people were scooped out of their families and brought to the residential schools, I can finally forgive my mother for what she was like when I was a child. So people begin to understand their situation in a broader lens of the sort of history and politics of the region, which has a huge effect in terms of healing and of being able to make sense of their experience in a broader context. So just to give you a quick idea of some of the things that have happened. Just last week, when Claire and I were coming back from Fort Albany, I went down to Moose Factory and we had the graduation of our first 4 Bachelor of Arts graduates from the Moose Factory pilot project. And that's a picture of them with their professor, Emily Ferries, and me and the chancellor of the university. The ceremony was held in Moose Factory, and it was a wonderful event. These folks have worked really hard on top of full-time jobs and families to complete a degree in these 3 years. And a number of people at that ceremony came to me and said, you know what, if they can do it, I can do it too. So people in their own communities got to see that it was possible, and that will help us to develop a kind of snowball effect of other people accessing the same kinds of opportunities. So that's another couple of pictures from the graduation ceremony, and the lady on the right-hand side of your screen, Bernice Kappa, she works for the Mushkegowuk Education Authority, and she graduated with highest honors. So did extremely well, and she's obviously very happy about the event. So as I said, we've expanded into other communities. I just want to talk about quickly the scale of things and the level of success. So we've now offered something in the order of 12 courses, I think, in the region. And in that time, 95% or 96%, pardon me, of the students have successfully completed those courses. And those are the identical courses that our students in Sudbury are taking. And that's actually a better completion rate than we typically get in Sudbury. It's about 5 or 6% better than what we get at the university. So there's really good capability in the community. The people who are studying are serious. They're adults. You know, they're not going to waste their time. They don't have any time to waste. As I said, we had 4 graduates that we celebrated. And between the 4 communities right now, there's over 60 students who are taking courses in the various communities. So one of the things that it's important to understand is that in those communities where very few people have a formal education, even a modest number of people who are able to take on leadership roles that are made possible by their education can have a huge impact.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
How many of those students are males?
I don't have the number right off the top of my head. It's overwhelmingly female. But I mean, that's actually going to be true of universities in general. In universities now, it's over 60% female, and in the arts, it's over 80% female. So, yeah. One of the phenomena that occurs in these remote coastal communities is that the professional positions in the community are taken up by expats. So white folks come up, well, not necessarily white folks, but folks come up from the south, and they take the positions up there because there's nobody up there trained to do it. So I had a very interesting experience. When I was in one of the coastal communities last fall, a young woman from Brampton arrived. She was a first-year teacher, had just graduated in the spring. She was of Caribbean descent, and other than her placements as part of her BA degree, had never been in front of a classroom. And she was going to go into a class of 30 students, probably a third of whom were affected by fetal alcohol syndrome, and half or more had attention deficit disorder, and lived in households and in a community context that was totally dysfunctional. This poor person had no idea where she was, culturally or even geographically. I hope she had a good year. She certainly was very enthusiastic and had her heart in the right place. But often in these communities, you have people who are inexperienced, who land there, spend a couple of years, and because these schools are underfunded pretty dramatically, something in the order of 40% less funding than the Southern Ontario schools, the salaries don't match and they don't stay long. And then somebody else arrives from Brampton and has to start the cycle all over again. One of our hopes is that by providing these university courses on the coast, is that we begin to train people to take those positions. So in Kashechewan, the majority of our students are teacher's aides who work in the school already. Some of them have 10 years of being a teacher's aide. They need to do a BA in order to have their teachables to do their education degree and then be able to be teachers in the community. What a difference it will make when the teacher understands the community, knows the people, people, has a kind of cultural connection with what's going on. And our hope is that we'll do the same with people who want to do nursing or business or economic development or any of the other professions in the area. So when we went around the first year that we offered courses and we asked all of our students, what does it mean to you that we can offer these courses in the community? One of them said, the fact that I can, she's middle-aged, the lady who said this. In fact, she's one of the two ladies who was at the meeting with the Trafalgar Club last summer, following record. She said, the fact that I can, at my age and in my community, take these courses and succeed means that the nieces and nephews I'm raising can too. And that gives them one more reason to stay alive. You know, I think it's difficult for us here, living in a land of privilege and opportunities all around us, to understand the impact that these kinds of things can have on giving people hope and possibilities in a context where there aren't a lot of possibilities and there isn't a lot of hope. So it's a very powerful impact. Now, going forward, what do we need in order to keep going? We need funding for program costs. So we've applied again this year for that same federal program that gave us $250,000 last year to deliver courses in the communities. That pays for things like the airplanes to get, the airline costs to get faculty members into the remote communities, the salaries for people to offer the courses, all of the costs for a coordinator to work with the students. Many of them don't know how to apply for funding, don't know how to do many of the things that they need to do in order to access education. In many cases, we need funding for student tuition. So these folks don't earn big salaries and they live in places where the costs are very, very high for all kinds of things. In Adawapiskat, gasoline is $2.45 a liter. So it's not a cheap place to live. And then in two of the communities where I said that Contact North was not active with a center, Kashechewan and Fort Albany, there is no adult learning center. And the place that we think we have a solution for Kashechewan, on the local elementary school has a portable we can use, but in Fort Albany, as of right now, there is no building, there is no opportunity for an adult learning center. So what we're having to do is restrict ourselves to evenings and weekends in the high school when the lab is available, which is not ideal. And what we hope for the community is an adult learning center that's accessible during normal hours so that actually people can go full-time and not just restrict themselves to weekends and evenings. So those are the main needs that we see. I think there's a role to play for Rotary. I mean, you folks have to get a sense for that yourselves, but both with the issue of tuition support, bursaries in other words, and with the construction of an adult learning center in Fort Albany, the help of Rotary could make a big difference. And once we have that center built in Fort Albany, courses from all of those Contact North suppliers become accessible to students, literacy training with the literacy partners that they work with, high school upgrading for adults, all of those things become accessible in addition to our courses. So we can have a big impact in these places by making that key infrastructure available. So I think I have talked at you as long as it is reasonable to do. And I'd really like to answer questions. Yeah?
But we're not helping, but just educating. We got to create employment. When are we going to create employment?
Well, so a couple of things. First of all, there's a significant amount of employment in the communities now, which goes to people from the south who don't live in the communities, and that money flows right out of that community again. So one of the easy sort of low-hanging fruit is if you're going to have teachers and nurses, eventually doctors, business managers, accountants in those communities, then train them from that community. That's the first level. The second is that my background's in forestry. I live in a mining town in Sudbury. There's significant development potential for natural resources in the north. Some of you may even have heard of the Ring of Fire project that's underway. historically, Indigenous people have had the lowest level jobs in those projects, like the De Beers mine, the Victor mine up in near Attawapiskat. As we educate them, they can have the higher jobs. There's lots of environmental monitoring, benchmarking that has to be done associated with those projects. The university that I'm going to, Laurentian University, has a big project to educate Indigenous people in the sciences. But before they can be anything except truck drivers and sweepers and cooks helpers in the mining camps, they have to have the skills required to do the work. So this kind of education that we're talking about makes the jobs that are already there accessible, makes it possible as other resource jobs come into availability for them to take them. It's not perfect, but it's a beginning. There's also, in many of these mining projects, a significant opportunity for Indigenous people and communities to form their own companies and to be contractors to those resource development organizations. And in some, on the Quebec side, they've been more successful with that, running airlines, running trucking companies, being construction contractors. So I think one of the realities is you can't do any meaningful work these days without an education, and so it's building that capacity. Yeah.
A couple of questions for you. The first is this certificate program, does that then count toward your credits for a BA?
Yes.
All the courses count toward that?
So the students have a choice. They can, those who just want to get a certificate in Indigenous Studies can, after they accumulate their 24 credit hours in the right courses, can apply for that. What we encourage them to do is to say, well, at least, set yourself a target of getting there. Most of them, by the time they get enough credits for that, will say, why don't I get the degree, right? They're comfortable with it. And so as long as they don't apply for their certificate, if they're not granted the certificate, then all of those credits apply towards a bachelor's.
That's great. I would like to hear that. Now, I also wondered, could I, if I was in Attawapiskat, could I complete my entire BA online in Attawapiskat?
You could. Now, to do a BA, for example, in Indigenous Studies, you can have a maximum number of Indigenous Studies credits, and then you'll have to do other things.
But I can do it right in town.
Right, and because, and so I mentioned that in 2 of the communities we needed to build adult learning centers with infrastructure. That then makes all of the credits available from either Laurentian University, could be in law and justice, could be in psychology, could be in business. The other courses for the BA are available at a distance, either online or in the traditional correspondence format. Now, that's available from us, but they can also take credits from other institutions that offer distance courses and have some of those under a letter of permission count towards their degree with us. And most of these students are coming from because they're nearly all employed. They have a college credit of some kind. Some of them will have had the Aboriginal Teacher Education Program certificate from one of the colleges. That gives them 30 credits towards a degree under an agreement that we have with most of the colleges. Or if they've taken a licensed practical nurse program, or if they've taken a social work college program, we have articulation agreements that grant prior credit. And so they don't arrive, they don't have to start to do 90 or 120 credits right off the bat.
Great. So then, final question. If it was if I wanted to have a teaching degree in education, can I do a combined thing, or would I then have to go out to the community to get some of the teaching labs or the nursing labs or whatever?
Yeah, so for some of the courses, in some of the disciplines, like if you were doing engineering or nursing, there are some things that you'll have to go out of the community for. There are also opportunities with other partners like Northern College that offers, for example, a paramedic program. I think they cyclically do a pre-nursing program, but you can get some advanced credit for some of the practical work through that. One of the things that our project has built in is the development of an education plan for each student that looks at what their goals are, what have they done before, what credit can they get for other things, what do they have to get in the community, and sort of makes a plan over several years for them to access those things that they need. My sense is that because of the success we're having with this initiative now, other institutions may well want to partner as we go down the road, and There's a couple of areas where there's clear indication of a demand. Nursing is one, teaching is the other, where we already have those jobs in the community.
Pierre, perhaps we could hear from our other Rotarian here who was up in Fort Albany with you. And
Don't touch the button.
Okay. I'm Claire, for those of you who didn't meet. Well, we founded this Aboriginal committee and we started thinking what we would like to do. And one of the things we thought of, which would be fairly easy to do, is to do a scholarship program. And we have committed to doing one student for the next 3 years, and a fairly significant amount, so that will enable them to study $7,000 a year. And we're going to award it to a student who has already completed first year remotely in their community and has achieved good academic standing, so we know they're a serious student. And we've actually modeled it on a program that Maple Grove United Church in Oakville has done, and I think they sponsored a student for 2 years. She's a mature mother with children, and it's been quite successful. So that's one thing we want to do that's fairly simple. The other thing we're thinking about is how can we help with continued education, perhaps help with the continued education sector. And Pierre has worked in the communities and identified Fort Albany as an extremely well-run reserve. So he invited to take me up there to go meet the people there and have initial discussions for a needs assessment. And my club paid for me to go, for which I'm very grateful. So I went last weekend to meet the people there. And if you want to have me to your club to talk about it, or I have written quite a detailed report. If you indicate on your comment card or in sign-on sheet that you want a copy of that, I'll be happy to send it to you. Because it talks about my observations of the culture, who I met, what the needs are in the community, and what the discussions were at the meeting. And we basically identified there is a huge need in this community. The Education Authority feels there is a huge need, there's a huge lack of space. The social workers want to switch to a full employment model for welfare, which is how Ontario works. They can only offer that if they offer retraining, because there's 200 people in welfare. They're basically full-time. This is a career for them. So 200 out of a community of 1,000. So if they can offer retraining, they can get more money, like 3 or 4 more staff members. But they've got no space to offer that training. So there's a lot of support in the community for something like that. We even looked at 2 possible sites. But we've got to find a building, and we've got to find the funding to implement it. So a global grant will cover, if we manage to find a police building, it will cover hooking up all the things that need water, sewer, electricity, internet. It can provide equipment. We can even finish off the building to the requirements of an education center, but it won't provide the building. So we either have to look at getting a used building or find donations for a new one. And I had some discussions with a modular building manufacturer. If we were to go brand new, it costs, a new building costs 60 to 70,000. Transportation costs to get it up there, 100,000. And you have to go in on an ice road between January and April because that's the only way you could get there by road. Okay, so it was very, very interesting discussion. One thing I was very impressed with is you can tell where there's been federal money spent in that community. There's a beautiful school, there's a beautiful women's shelter, and they are impeccably maintained there. Really, that school was built in 2002 and brand new. So they really maintain things very well. And Pierre said, you don't get that in some of the other communities. I also spoke to a total coincidence, a former modular building client of mine who actually had built a police station there. And he says they worked in 14 to 15 communities, First Nations communities, and this is one of the better organized communities. So we have a feeling that it would be a good one to work in. But if we do a project like this, it's a huge undertaking, so we really need to grow the team. So that's why we're here today. If you have any interest in participating, we'd like to know about it. So if you could fill in a comment card, tell us your thoughts, give us your contact information, help promote it at your club. We've got a long way to go if we're going to do this. It's It's going to be a longer term project, but we feel it's a way we can make a big difference. So,
How does that fit with the global grant stuff?
sorry, who's with it?
Global grants, how does that fit in?
We could get global grant money, most probably, to, if we got a used building, we could renovate the building for our needs. We could do all the hookups of electrical, water, sewer. We could buy desks, we could buy computers. All those kinds of things, but they won't actually pay for the physical building. Well, we have a few leads, you know, bands that they might be able to get another used building from De Beers Mine. Okay. There are numerous leads that we could possibly work on in partnership with others. So, but there's a lot of work in trying to raise money. And I think what will happen is, once we get a commitment from one person, then maybe other people will come on board as well. You know, I think there'll be a bit of a snowball effect if we can get it money. So for the scholarship, our club said they would cover $7,000 a year, but it's a lot of money for one club to spend money on, because you could also, the money goes a lot further in the third world, right? To sponsor people here, it's more expensive. So if your club is able to help out with any little amount of that, $500 would be welcome, even to help kind of subsidize the costs, so our club doesn't have to bear all the costs. We have applied for a district grant which will cover half the cost of the scholarship for the first year only. But other than that, wouldn't it be great if we could grow this and have a Rotary Indigenous Scholarship Fund and fund more than one? You know? Wouldn't it be great if we could grow this and fund 2, 3, or 4? Okay. So really, it's just some thought. If you feel you could help out or would like to be involved, even if you've got no money, if you've got time and energy, we'd love to hear from you. I just want to mention there's 2 handouts that Pierre brought with him today, and one of them has the contact number for Bill and me and here. So if you haven't picked those up, if you could. And if you please sign in, because I know some people came in late, but if you please sign in so we know you're there. And if you want a copy of the Fort Albany report, please note that. If you want, please let us know that too. And I think that's about it. Thank you. He was always such a good speaker and so passionate about